Hello, everybody, and welcome to a webinar organized by Euroheat and Power. Today, we will focus on cooling demands at global level. So my name is Eloi, and I will share this webinar. Before we start, a few words about cooling. As you all know, cooling has become a big issue in global policy discussions as a result of the impact of global warming and continued urbanization. The International Energy Agency has, in various reports, highlighted the global cooling challenge. End of 2021, we counted 1.5 billion air conditioning units in the world, and under current trends, cooling demands will be amongst the main drivers of demands for electricity by 2050. So the challenge on the various continents is to plan and organize in a way that these cooling demands are met in the most efficient way. Today, we'll have a conversation focusing on district cooling, and we are very happy to team up with IFC, a member of the World Bank, who will present a new analysis on district cooling. So we have a busy and a very interesting program. After the presentations, I will keep some time for questions. So please, to all participants, go in the chat and submit your questions. So now I'm glad to call our first speakers, Alexander Sharabarov and Upasana Varma, who are respectively senior energy specialists and lead for investment in district cooling at IFC World Bank. And please, the floor is yours for a presentation of your analysis. Please, Alexander, Upasana.
Good. Thank you very much, Elwan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Alexander Sharabarov. I'm a senior energy specialist with IFC. Thank you very much for joining this webinar, and we would like to especially thank our friends from Euroheat and Power to inviting us to talk about this exciting topic. Today we will be talking about district cooling, and specifically we will share with you our findings from a recent analysis of district cooling opportunities in emerging markets. Before that, let us quickly introduce who we are. IFC is a private sector arm of the World Bank Group. We finance and provide advisory services to private companies in developing or emerging markets. If you are a utility equipment manufacturer or a real estate developer based in a developed country but would like to expand the operations into emerging markets, we would be more than happy to assist you. We are truly a global institution. We have offices in more than 100 countries. Last fiscal year, we committed a record almost $33 billion to private companies and financial institutions in emerging markets. Before we will go into the business models and financing for district cooling, let us make sure we're all on the same page, and I will make some introductory slides. So please bear with me if you already know this material, but I think we have a diverse audience today, so it's important to make sure we're all on the same page. So district cooling, the concept itself is fairly straightforward. It's a concept based on scale economies, and instead of every building or end user having its own cooling infrastructure, cooling equipment, chillers, split AC units, VRF, and so on, district cooling assumes centralized production of chilled water by a central cooling plant or cooling plants, which are then connected to end users or buildings, typically by an underground network of pre-insulated polyurethane pipelines, which are then connected to buildings themselves through energy transfer station. And of course, energy transfer station is nothing else than a good old heat exchanger. District cooling requires diverse cooling load profiles of end users. So you want to avoid having users with the same profile. So the more diverse, the more mixed it is, the better it is. From the sectors that we've seen in developing markets, typically commercial load can be an anchor, then retail, hospitality, and residential. Residential users on their own without any other loads are possible, but less desired. There are two main factors I'd like to highlight about district cooling. the big advantage is that it enables thermal sources which would not be possible to harness for individual heating solutions otherwise. So waste heat, solar heat, sea, river, lake-based cooling, all of this can be connected to end users via district cooling. Otherwise, for individual solutions, it's not practical. The other big part of district cooling systems is that they enable thermal energy storage. And the main purpose of it, they can be either chilled water or ice storage. And basically, if you want to visualize it, it's a big building, depending on the size, but it can be up to 5 stories tall, and it's really a building. And what it does, it shaves off peak cooling demand, which then translates into the need for less installed capacity, less peak power demand in the national grid, which in emerging markets can be a big challenge. So let us talk a little bit about benefits of district cooling. Here's a disclaimer that we don't want to oversell district cooling. What we are interested in is in promoting sustainable cooling. And district cooling itself is not a panacea for all things cooling. It has its specific application and specific place. Typically, the condition is referenced as a minimum density of a cooling load of 8,000 to 10,000 refrigeration tons per square kilometer. And then you need to have an adequate number of equivalent full load hours. So you need to have a concentrated demand for an extended period of time. But when the conditions are right, district cooling and it's properly designed, because we also see that sometimes in emerging markets, pilot projects can be over-designed, oversized. But in this case, district cooling offers an affordable cooling, so life cycle costs are 40 to 50% lower, and so are the emissions. And this is the most conservative scenario for district cooling, because if you connect then district cooling system to renewable sources, so those numbers are much better. So much more affordable, much more climate friendly. Depending on the business model, it can help more efficient investment allocation. And then from the government point of view, from the national point of view, district cooling results in less peak power demand, up to 30%. So basically in a country, you would need less power plants, less transmission and distribution bottlenecks. So let us go into the business models for district cooling. And in a nutshell, we looked at 4 countries in our analysis: Colombia, Egypt, Malaysia, Thailand, and before that we looked in India. And the big finding is that district cooling in those countries, it already exists, with Malaysia being the champion, and Upasana will talk more about it, but it's largely an unregulated space. District cooling can be regulated by some acts, like for instance in Malaysia, Cogeneration Act applies to district cooling, but otherwise it's unregulated and it's fully private, so it's business to business. I will not go into all the details here. We put some countries as an example. It doesn't mean that all district cooling in those countries follow this this pattern, but again, from our findings, the emerging markets, they don't have a specific enabling environment, except for Egypt. Egypt has a district cooling code, and we have the privilege of having Dr. Alaa Lama, who will be talking more about this. So most district cooling projects in those countries were created purely on a commercial competitiveness basis. So basically, district without any support. District cooling was basically the cheapest solution to provide cooling, and it's largely regulation by contract. This slide shows some more examples of business models used in district energy. But again, the bottom line is that there's no perfect recipe. So in most emerging markets, unless there is an established and functioning PPP framework, regulation by contract is the most common business model. Now, let us go into a little more detail about the differences between fully private to public, joint venture, and then in-house models. Naturally, the most successful business models are those where parties manage the risk they're most qualified to manage. So for instance, you don't want to have district cooling utility taking on real estate risk and vice versa. Where there's enough market awareness and trust in the commercial law, regulation by contract, concessions are the most prevalent, or sometimes they're also called cooling as a service, although this definition ranges depending on where you are. In some markets, we see that joint ventures between a real estate developer and district cooling are the most common form. Real estate developers tend to prefer majority ownership, which is then regulated by a shareholders agreement. It is possible to have a successfully executed in-house district cooling project for a large real estate developer. However, there are many caveats that need to be met. As district cooling is not their core business, they would need to outsource this expertise and then have solid EPC and O&M arrangements. There are a lot of risks. There are risks of oversizing the design of the district cooling system, cost overruns. So I think our advice is and really not to experiment with it and go it alone, but whichever business model you prefer is to find a experienced partner, someone who has done it before. When it comes to cooling as a service, the most common tariff structure is a three-part tariff. Typically, the capacity charge covers return on equity, the fixed charge covers costs such as insurance, and then the consumption charge covers variable costs. So PPP business model. The municipal PPP business model is the most preferred from the standpoint of developing sizable district cooling projects. That requires an established PPP framework in a country, and you also need to have a proactive champion municipality or a mayor, somebody who is aware of the benefits and is pushing for it. There are two aspects which are important in this kind of agreement. One, if a municipality is willing to provide a minimum offtake guarantee, that gives a strong boost and reduces the risk and improves value for money of such a concession. The second one is also a negotiation who pays for the district cooling network, because this can be a sizable part of the investment, up to 50% of the total project cost. If a city can afford to pay for it, that would certainly give a huge boost. Incorporating district cooling in urban planning is key. As an example, the World Bank Group is supporting the government of India in operationalizing its India Cooling Action Plan. And one of the recommendations which was made is to make consideration of district cooling in greenfield cities or new city districts which are being built mandatory for developments of over 8,000 refrigeration tons per square kilometer. Basically to do a pre-feasibility study, to look at district cooling first, and it is possible that it's not functioning, but it has to be considered. We have another slide here that shows a possible split in coverage and responsibilities between a district cooling provider, various off-takers. I will not go into details, but we'll be sharing this presentation and you can review it later. And of course, we're always available for questions. Let us now go into the analysis of the district cooling opportunities, and I'll quickly cover the methodology that we used. So the background is that IFC made our first equity investment in district cooling platform in India together with the Breed. And following that investment, we wanted to take a systematic look at district cooling opportunities. So together with DEFCO, City, and Aguasol consultancies, we explored the potential for adopting district cooling in emerging markets, primarily targeting commercial and mixed-use real estate. And here you see the methodology and the screening criteria we use for to identify high potential markets. So in essence, we applied a top-down and bottom-up approach. Factors which we included were known projects in countries. We looked at enabling environment. Again, we quickly realized that there's not much by the way of specific enabling environment, but then we also looked at cooling policies. For instance, Colombia included a district cooling in its nationally determined contribution. We looked at a whole slew of other elements of enabling environment. And then a very important part was the real estate sector growth. So without further ado, let me pass the baton to my colleague Upasana, who will share with you the results of our analysis and tell you what IFC can offer to companies interested in district cooling. Upasana, please take it away. I will be continuing to move the slides.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to be connected to all of you. So regarding the study, the high potential markets that we came up with based on the indicators are Malaysia, Thailand, Egypt, and Colombia. And we already knew the India market. The other markets that we did look at, for example, in LAC, Mexico holds potential. In Asia, there are several, like obviously China, where there's a lot of district energy, but a lot of it is in the public sector. This study, we were looking for private sector opportunities, and it's not a very academic study. It's to find out what is the business potential for district cooling in these markets. For the private sector, so China we excluded, but Vietnam, Indonesia, Philippines are other very interesting markets. But in terms of cooling maturity, they are not quite there yet. Next slide, please. So the India market, the market potential is really huge, and it's driven by very high commercial real estate growth. And also in terms of cooling penetration, India is at a very low level. It's like 8%. So the potential to grow is huge. The market is estimated at 12 million refrigeration tons in the next 10, 15 years. There are existing projects. There are about 10 existing projects of 4,000 refrigeration tons. And these are a mix in terms of business models that Alexander covered. So these are a mix. There are some which are done in-house by real estate developers. There are obviously airports and malls which have been done. And then there is also PPP concessions and cooling as a service between real estate developers and district cooling companies. There is, for example, the Breathe, who has entered the market, a foreign player for India. And then there are also concessions being given out. For example, there's the Hyderabad Pharma City project for 125,000 refrigeration tons just outside of Hyderabad, which is an industrial park for the pharmaceutical industry. In terms of enabling environment, at this point in time, there's no specific regulation, but Alexander talked about the national cooling plan that the government has, and the World Bank Group is working with the government to give more detail to this plan. Next slide, please. For Malaysia, this is the most advanced market in emerging markets that we came across. There are already more than 30 district cooling projects, of which like 50% are 5,000 RT and below. So which shows that it's really penetrated deep, like in the real estate developers. In terms of business models also, it's again quite diverse, which shows the maturity of the market. So it's being done in-house, it's being done through JVs, and there are also concessions out there. There are power utilities that are also doing this. So there are also tri-generation opportunities for district cooling. In terms of enabling environment, while there's no specific legislation that's pushing district cooling, but it is it's the energy efficiency of buildings that's mandated, which is proving to be the thing that's propelling it. There's good real estate growth, and something that the government has been working on. They are promoting cluster development and regional development. And under this, so there are regional corridors that are coming up. And under this, there are several of them. But one that is quite promising, and Michael, I think, is going to talk about that, is Iskandar, Johor, where there are several cities and developments that are coming up, which offer district cooling opportunities. And in terms of like the next step would be more advocacy with the government and to get the the municipalities and the government players more aware of this so that it can be incorporated into into the master plans of cities. Next slide, please. Thailand, Thailand right now it just has about 40,000 RT, but it is the most exciting market. There is so much development that's happening out there on the back of commercial real estate growth. In terms of business models, it's more the JV model, which is actually showing that real estate developers want to do this, but taking like long-term payment risk, 30-year risk on other district cooling companies, etc. They're not that comfortable with that. So they bring them into the same SPV, and all of them have the same incentives of making making district cooling projects work. So the JV model is very popular. In terms of enabling environments, it's again the energy efficiency of buildings that's taking the market forward. And in terms of where the opportunity lies, it's the Eastern Economic Corridor. Again, cluster development, smart city development that the government in its national plans is interested in developing. And there are many opportunities out there. There's an airport city, a digital hub, a medical hub, which offer these opportunities. Next slide, please. In terms of Egypt, Egypt has, it's a market that developed by the gas utilities and tri-generation. But it's a mature market. There are 10 district cooling systems already in place, and then there are opportunities to do more. The commercial real estate growth is again driving this. There are many cities that are planned by fourth generation cities. That's what they are called. And there is this organization, government organization, NUCA, under the Ministry of Housing. It's the New Urban Communities Association, which is planning 10, 15 new fourth generation cities. And then there is also the new administrative capital, which is coming up outside of Cairo, which ACUD is the agency that looks at it. So there's 100,000 refrigeration tons that's expected to come up out there. There are in the public sector, there is gas cool, which was there. And another interesting feature of the market is that there are several players, real estate developers, as well as district cooling companies from the UAE, which who already know district cooling, and they are developing projects in Egypt. Next slide, please. In Colombia, this is a small market right now, but with long-term potential. So right now there are 7 district cooling projects, and it's about 8,000 refrigeration tons. The business model is again driven by private utilities, so it's more of a tri-generation model. In terms of enabling environment, there is no energy efficiency requirements. So, the regulation doesn't exist, but under the Ministry of Environment for 26 cities, they're doing feasibility studies for district cooling, and 10 of these studies have been done. They are keen to promote it. And then there is a lot of hotels that are coming up also in terms of on the Atlantic coast. So that presents another opportunity. Next slide, please. So in turn, I'm going to shift focus a bit to the financing of these projects. So a bit about IFC. So our business is investments in emerging markets, and we cover like the whole gamut of products, loans, equity, but we also mobilize. So it's not like IFC wants to do business ourselves. We want to develop also like we want to provide finance to new sectors also. So like, for example, district cooling in emerging markets, it's relatively new. So when we bring forth the financing, we also mobilize local lenders or other financial institutions so that the market understanding of these projects grows. We also do upstream development of projects for early stage projects. And then we also do advisory, which helps to create markets and unlock investment opportunities. Next slide, please. This is a bit about the market. District cooling is obviously it has a very positive climate impact. And so in terms of the financing that you could raise, there's a lot of sustainable financing that's come up in markets. Uh, on this, I would just like to say that it's, of course, the trend is growing and it's getting more diversified. So like green loans, green bonds, then there are blue bonds, blue loans, there's sustainable debt, there's also sustainability linked debt. So the next slide, please. And what I want to say in this slide is to, I think it's gone off. Can you see the slides? Okay, I can see it. Sorry, it went off
Yes,
for a
we
moment.
can see the slide.
Okay, sorry. Sorry, I was having a bit of difficulty. So the emerging markets are becoming a part of this sustainable finance story. The next slide, please. So in terms of sustainable finance, just a very quick word on what are green, blue, social sustainable bonds. These are related to use of proceeds. And when we have sustainability linked financing, this is more target based. So for example, a city can say that they want to reduce their GHG emissions from a certain level to a certain level, but whether they do so by having more renewable energy or by decarbonizing transport, they can choose, so they don't have to specify what projects, but they set a target for themselves. Next slide, please. So for district cooling, in terms of creating bankable projects, we thought, what are the impediments that we see in the market, the bankability impediments that we see in the market. And one such impediment that we see is the upfront cost. And for the upfront cost, because buildings, they come up in phases, and also occupancy of buildings, it kind of ramps up over a period of time. And this is a risk, in terms of, there is a certain amount of oversizing that goes in, while over the project life, these projects are certainly more cost effective, but there are upfront costs that are associated, which for private sector developers, they may find it difficult. The second is the off-take risk. It's a private sector to private sector driven model, and to take long-term payment risks in the sector can prove difficult. Next slide, please. So I've already kind of talked about some of the risks. Some of the others are in terms of capacity development of stakeholders, in terms of electricity price subsidies, which makes it less commercially viable for district cooling. Next slide, please. So this is going back to the slide where I said that we can do financing, we can help in project development, we can help with advocacy with governments, and we can also help in knowledge dissemination, like this seminar that we are doing right now. We can work with real estate developers and disseminate knowledge. So we are very happy to do that. I'm going to stop here and look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Prasanna. It was really very interesting insights. Before we go to our panel, actually, I have a question. You mentioned green finance, Upasana, and you said there is a very diverse landscape of products, so to say. Do you feel it has the potential to boost in the future the development of district energy? And I'm asking this because I've heard that sometimes our projects seem too local or diverse in their settings to attract sustainable finance. So can you say a bit more about the potential of green finance for our project? Thank you.
Absolutely. So the thing is that one could raise plain vanilla financing, or you could raise labeled financing. The purpose of labeled financing is to actually bring more visibility to your projects. And sometimes it can also result in a greenium, or, which is like you could get a lower cost of financing, or in sustainability linked financing, actually, if you meet your targets, the cost of financing could step down. So these projects, they lend themselves very well to sustainable debt. And what it really opens up is another set of investors who are interested. There's a very special set of investors who are interested in green projects. So while you have the regular financiers, you also have like more financiers at your disposal who could look at these projects.
Thank you. I don't know, Alexander, do you want to add something? Otherwise, we will jump to the panel.
No, nothing to add. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now for the next 30 minutes, I would like to jump to our panel discussion. So the idea is that we will illustrate the presentation on the analysis of IFC World Bank with a focus on different regions and continents. And I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Olama, expert, Michael Jakobson, president of the Asia Pacific Urban Energy Association, and Cristina Mariaca Orozco, advisor at UNIDO. And I will proceed with a couple of questions. So first, I would like to start, of course, we have heard the presentation of Alexander and Upasana. I have a very general question on the status of cooling in the various regions where you are working. On all these markets, obviously we see the need for more investment in the energy sector to renew existing assets, to develop new assets. So the question is cooling recognized in its own right, and in particular the need to address cooling demands in the most efficient way as a condition to develop a competitive, efficient, and sustainable urban environment? Ala, I think you could start. Please, can you update us and provide more information on the situation in Egypt?
Thank you very much. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. And thank you for Euroheat and Power for inviting me in this seminar. I also thank Alexander and Upasana for their kind suggestion and invitation. I will try to sort of make a resume of what is happening in the Middle East and in Egypt. In the Middle East, now the largest concentration of district cooling in the world is around the Gulf area. And this is led by the GCC country, which is the associations that include Bahrain, Oman, Qatar, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia. Now, these countries, there is a study made by Booz and Company in 2013 on the potential of district cooling in this area. And if you look at 2010, the whole GCC peak cooling demand was 36 million tons. And the expected potential of the whole air conditioning scene is actually going to triple by 2030, or those are the expectation anyway. So if you look at the figure for district cooling in those countries, you find that Saudi Arabia has the largest potential, followed by the United Arab Emirates, and then Qatar and Bahrain, and Kuwait coming somewhere in between. Now, if we have a look at the potential, you'll find that Saudi Arabia has a potential of 13 million tons by 2030, followed by the United Arab Emirates with 9 million tons, Qatar with 3 million tons, Bahrain with 1 million tons, Kuwait with 3 million tons, Oman with 1 million tons, a total of 30 million tons, as opposed to 3.26 million tons existing in 2010. Now, this is very large potential. On the whole, what is driving this large increase in Saudi Arabia is the Kingdom Vision for 2030, which is really doing a great boom in Saudi Arabia and expected to increase the demand for district cooling by 13 million tons, followed by 8 million tons for United Arab Emirates, and then Qatar and Kuwait each for 3 million tons, and Bahrain was 1 million tons. Kuwait is a latecomer, although it started early with Al Ahmadi plant, but it is a bit lagging due to the enacting of DC regulation is not there yet. The challenges facing those projections, of course, is institutional, enacting of DC regulation, poor planning for some project, and other problem with the perception of this recooling itself. Now, when it comes to Egypt, what is the driver is the construction of 16 new cities, the majority of which require this recooling in their economic, leisure, institution, administrative, and academic center. Leading, as Upsama has pointed out, leading those projects is in new administration capital district cooling plants, and those at the moment are around 120,000 tons. One plant is operation, the other is coming on, and it will probably exceed 120,000 tons. Although Egypt started with 2 projects in 2005, it had a bit of a lull, and then now the expected projects are increasing. Those are located in the Nile Valley, the Suez Canal, and Sinai. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ala. Christina, will you update us on state of play and prospect for Colombia?
Yes, of course. Good morning and good afternoon, good night for everyone. Thank you for these invitations. In Colombia and in Latin America, refrigeration and air conditioning is a growing market in this moment. Climate change is very high in our countries. Temperatures, humidity are growing very fast, and air conditioning becomes not only for comfort, but it becomes necessary to be productive and develop our economies. In Colombia in particular, the use of air conditioning is projected to grow in 60–70% in the use of energy, and in this same amount in the use of refrigerant substance. So the growing is very important in this moment for Colombia and in general in Latin America. And there are some policies that are covering the energy efficiency for air conditioning and refrigeration that is we expect to accomplish in the next years. For example, in our country, we have to accomplish the Montreal Protocol about the control of substance, HFCs. And for example, we are working in the energy efficiency for the equipment in air conditioning. And now we have a new challenge that is the energy transition for all the energy forms in our country. So we are trying to introduce in the end users, utilities, municipalities, in all the change of cooling, the knowledge about district cooling, about district energy as a new technical model, a new business model, in order to face the challenge of the growing of air conditioning in our countries, because it's a very important market. We have all of, not all, but the important sectors as industrial, real estate, and air conditioning associations very focused in find some green cooling technologies for our market.
Thank you, Christina. Michael, can you present the big picture for Asia? I mean, really the big picture, and then we'll look into more details, into establish frameworks, into policies or business model, please.
Sure. Thanks, Elwan. Thanks for having me, and a great initiative to have this event, and congratulations to IFC, Alexander and Upasana. A really great summary of your analysis there. I think I will come back and refer to what you already said. It was very informative. Yeah, personally, I've been very happy to be active in the Asia Pacific region. It's indeed a really interesting region. It's a huge region. It's a diverse region. A lot of things have happened on the cooling side since 1990. The space cooling demand have increased by 70 times in China, to say something, about 15 times in India. Looking at these countries, I mean, looking ahead, China will double the demand, the space cooling demand, to 2050, and India will take another leap of 15 times higher cooling demand. And if we look globally, actually, I mean, the energy used for space cooling will triple until 2050, and half of it will be in Asia Pacific, and half of it will be actually accounted by India, China, and Indonesia. So a lot of things are happening in the region. We heard 3 interesting countries previously from Alexander and Upasana: India, Malaysia, and Thailand. But it's also other countries that are of interest. I mean, as I mentioned, it's quite diverse. The economies are different. The economic development are different. The climate situation is different. There are different political systems and traditions and so on. So very diverse markets. Just zooming in maybe a little bit on Southeast Asia, the use of air conditioners in Malaysia and Singapore are above 80%, while looking at a country like Vietnam is less than 20%. Thailand reaching about 30%. This is very much linked with the economic growth, but we will really see the increase in these countries in the coming decade. So, I mean, the potential is simply great, to say the least. And we should remember, district cooling is not really a new thing. It started in the region in Japan back in 1975 in Osaka. With that said, there is still a lot of awareness rising to do. So again, it's a great session to have this one.
Thank you, Michael, for the insight. Actually, if I continue with you, Michael, I mean, of course, you are covering a very wide region, but can we say that there are some kind of established regulatory frameworks? I mean, are there some kind of tendencies if we look at Asia for cooling?
It is quite different. I mean, there is a district cooling act in Singapore in place that is covering a part of Singapore. There are initiatives, like we heard Upasana mentioned before, with the National Cooling Action Plan in India, but also district cooling guidelines in India recently, which is released by the Bureau of Energy Efficiency. We see municipal cooling action plans coming up more and more, where district cooling is mentioned, not least in Vietnam. I think that is quite interesting. So I would not say that there is a general regulatory framework in place, really, but there is definitely inspiration to get from surrounding countries, and it's definitely something that would help to accelerate the development of district cooling.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Christina, I will continue with you, actually, considering Colombia or the wider market in South America. I mean, also, do you see trends in terms of policy and regulations to address cooling demands?
Okay, as the study that Upasana show us, we don't have a specific policy for district cooling or district energy. We are introducing the concept of district energy and district cooling in different policies in Colombia. Even in Chile, they are working a policy for energía distrital, district energy as general, in order to have some framework to work. In Colombia, the framework, the policies framework that we are working, it's in the energy efficiency policy as a measure, district energy as a measure for improve the energy efficiency in urban planning. And the other way was climate change plans. national plans and city plans. So we introduced district cooling and district energy as a measure that we can introduce in our plan for climate change and energy efficiency. We are very aware to we have maybe have a wall and integrated policy for district energy if we want to push more the introduction of district energy in Colombia. But in this moment, these policies help us to introduce in the institutional framework and in the market some tools in order to promote the district energy. For example, energy efficient policy help us to have taxes exemptions in order to introduce and materialize projects in our country. And in the climate change way, we have a district cooling as an NDC, official NDC for the Colombian government, and it helps us to have a more visibility for investors, international inversions, international cooperation, etc. So this is a panorama for the regulatory framework in Colombia. Sorry, I forget. In this moment, right now, in this moment in Colombia, the Ministry of Energy is signing a technical regulatory framework for energy, thermal energy in buildings. So we have a chapter, district cooling chapter, chapter in this regulatory, in this technical regulation. And this is very, very important because in Colombia, before that, thermal energy was considering only for electric power generation. And now with this regulation, thermal energy will be in the end users. So this is a very important change in the regulatory framework and in the mind of the institutional framework in Colombia. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Well, these are really, really good news. Huh? And indeed, it is true that the role of national cooling plans, the role of municipal action plan and regulations on buildings are really key in favor of developing district cooling. I will turn to Ala. I mean, Upasana has already given some hints, but in terms of policies and regulations, what can you say about Egypt and the wider Middle East region?
Right.
If you want to add.
Yes, indeed. Yes. May I have the presentation again? If you look at the important regulation in the area, of course, the regulation started with Singapore in 2002 and 2009, and those were the regulations that opened the door for other countries to look at and to create their own district cooling regulation and rules. So after Singapore, there was Hong Kong with the district cooling service ordinance. And then Qatar came in 2016 with DC regulation of the state of Qatar. And this is a very important one because it talks about energy efficiency and is very strict about that. In Egypt, we only had DC codes and a regulatory framework study made by UNEP and UNIDO together. And those are the two important regulation backbones that drive the formulation of actually the contract of district cooling between supplier and provider. In Abu Dhabi, it started early in 2019, and it's a very methodical, clear regulations that guide you through the licensing process, arbitration, and all the problems that go through the whole life of a district cooling service. In Saudi Arabia, it was enacted in 2020, DC regulatory framework, and this is how the government is adopting the new district cooling project. In Dubai, It started a bit later, and it wasn't very available, although Dubai started early this recooling, but it came into line in 2021, and it provides the DC services for the Emirates of Dubai. So those are the driving force that will create a seamless way of doing this recooling in the area. Of course, it's also a barrier or a challenge for new project because of it's not coming online early enough in majority of the countries. But this is the status of the regulation around the whole area.
Thank you, Ala. And if I move to my next question, actually, in Egypt, in the Middle East, what do you think is the most challenging in developing this recooling? Is it the missing human resources or workforce, regulations, the need to get investors on board? And it's kind of, I have a question in the chat from participants. So when will we see really district cooling booming? Can you answer to this question?
Right. I think the main challenge and barrier is the perception that this recooling is more expensive, the wrong perception that this recooling is more expensive than traditional cooling forms. And this is not the case, of course. If you have a good district cooling system, you have to look at the net present value of the system and compare it with the net present value of a traditional system. And invariably, this recooling system will come on top. But this is not reaching the end user, it's not reaching the government, and it's not reaching the stakeholder as a general. I mean by that, actually, the developer and the people that are interested to put their money into the project. So I think this is the first challenge or hurdle. The second one is the lack of the government being involved into the regulation and trying to allocate places where this recooling should be started as early as possible. And then the third hurdle possibly is that the lending institutions are not on board. So when this recooling provider, for instance, or a big company come in on talk to the lending institution about this recooling, they're not aware of the importance of this recooling and where they should put it. I think so. Those are the challenges and barriers.
Okay, thank you. Very, very interesting what you said on the perception. So it means that as a sector, we need to spread more information. And I'm pretty sure actually that the work done by IFC, World Bank in this respect will help. If I turn to you, Christina, I mean, what are the big challenges you are facing in South America? How do we unlock the full potential?
I can say that we have the same challenge that Dr. Ala comes to give us. And I would like to add another one. It's to understand the business model in the end users and in the operators. Because in this moment, for example, the business model in Colombia is only private, and it's very difficult to make aware the end user how to work with this new business model. This is there are not confidence in the market in this new option from the end users, and if we don't have end users, we don't have this recooling. So this is the reality. So knowledge in the end user, it's very necessary, and it's a challenge here in Colombia and in general in Latin America, in order to have better business model, better contracts, better guarantees, and in order to have better design. Even the technical design of the district cooling must understand the business model, because in this moment it's very expensive for us have a big plant of district cooling, but it's not necessary to have a big plan from the start of the operation. Maybe the design could adapt and be more flexible, more flexible and modular, for develop this kind of business model. So adding to the challenge that Dr. Olama comes to say, I have to say end users, it's aware. It's very, very important for introduce district energy in Colombia.
Okay, thank you, Cristina. Michael, we have heard about the great developments in some countries in Asia. Now, this being said, I mean, what do you think are the big obstacles? I mean, how do we accelerate the pace of the cooling transition, so to say, on this big Asian Pacific market?
Yeah, I can just agree what has been said already. I think also that we see that there are some actually skepticism out there, because there are some cases that are not optimal. It's not showing the full potential of district cooling. There are great engineers, great project managers, but business managers understanding the business models is definitely a lack of that. And there's also often where there are lack of funds actually to really do it right from the beginning. I think this event is quite interesting as such. I mean, if I were a project owner and having a financial institution who is really having insight in this business, it makes it quite attractive to team up, to really understand that this is difficult. It is something that we have a lot of pitfalls along the way that we have to be careful about and make right from the beginning. I mean, it is what we always say, like the weakest link. It has to be sound development from idea all the way to commercial operation, and be aware of how to optimize the system along the way. I mean, there is not one silver bullet to succeed. We simply have to keep raise awareness. We have to educate. I think Euroheat and Power, APUEA, also IFC has a role here to play. I mean, we will not be able to build on those specialists who have built the systems until today. There will be a dramatic growth. There will be new labor needed. So education will be super important to be prepared for this growth. I personally think that in some markets, I mean, the boom is coming. I mean, Upasana mentioned Thailand. Something is really happening there. Developers are understanding the value. They see it in terms of sustainability for the whole company. So in some markets, it's happening. We just have to do what we do better and more to overcome all these challenges that we have talked about here today.
Thank you, Michael, for this insight. I have another question. You know that these days we hear a lot about cooling as a service, and I would like to collect your views on this concept. I mean, is it an offer that is growing on your respective markets? Maybe Michael, you can start.
Yeah, I mean, it is a contract or a business model, cooling as a service. And as we heard before from Alexander, I mean, district cooling is also cooling as a service. I think it's a terminology that is often hijacked by individual traditional solutions, less efficient, and kind of, what should we say, trying to hide the traditional technologies in a new fancy buzzword. So I think, I mean, I have no problem with the business model itself. I think it could be quite nice to use it, but it comes back to actually looking what is the feasible concept and technology to be applied. We often talk about that, okay, district cooling is suitable for high cooling demand dense areas, and it has scale advantages. It has so much more. I mean, it is a not in kind solution for HFC phase out. It is possible to provide flexibility services to the electricity grid so that we can integrate more variable renewable energy. We can avoid investments in the electricity grid. There are I mean, from a socioeconomic perspective, district cooling has enormous benefits, and we should look whether it is feasible or not first. I agree with what Alexander said before. There's no point to just promote district cooling for the purpose as such. I mean, if it's feasible, it's feasible, and then we should go for district cooling. If not, okay, then we can look for individual solutions, but we should not be tricked into that cooling as a service as such is something very efficient, I would say.
Mr. Alao, do you want to react on this?
Yes, thank you very much. In their excellent presentation, Alexander and Upasana, they talked about cooling as a service, and they explain what it is and where it's for. I agree that it's not a threat or an alternative to district cooling, because district cooling basically is the best solution for high density, high EFLH figures that exist anywhere. So if you have a high density cooling load demand and you have a high equivalent full load hours, then district cooling is the best solution. But on the other hand, cooling as a service has one advantage that is possibly going to be incorporated in district cooling eventually, and that is a look at the air side of a system. Usually district cooling provider will provide the water side, the stations, the network, and so on and so forth. And the majority of district cooling plants suffer from low delta T syndrome, which makes the system a bit less efficient unless there is good control in each building. With cooling as a service, it's a sort of an important point in it is that you look at an efficient way of delivering the cooling itself. So that should help district cooling. And if they are joined together in certain projects, it will eventually increase the efficiency of the project. And you can use then not-in-kind cooling technologies with it also.
Christina, do you want to add?
Okay, I think district cooling and district energy in Colombia, in our cities, is a very important way in order to have a develop our economy and our cities in a sustainable way. And it's a very important alternative for all our goals in order to have more efficient and in this moment our policy of energy transition. So I think, for example, energy transition is thinking every time people people that are not involved in district energy are thinking energy transition it's only electricity, but district cooling, district energy show us another way to have different energies that end users are using in the everyday. So district cooling is an important alternative to develop an energy transition and a smart energy transition and an urban planning very sustainable for our cities. In general, in Latin America, cities are growing very fast, and not every time is not very organized, etc. So it's necessary to have a planning of the city, planning the energy services, so this can help us to have a growing in our cities more sustainable.
Thank you, Christina. Now I would like to have a look on the questions we have from participants. So I will close the panel. So thank you very much. And I will have a look on the questions. I have one. What are the typical technologies for the cooling source? Chillers. Can somebody take this one? Michael, do you want to answer?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there is a mix. I mean, obviously, traditional chillers with cooling towers, but also we have seawater air conditioning with deep sea water, cold water utilization. We have utilization of free cooling from more cooler lakes and other water bodies as such, utilizing wastewater systems as the heat sink, so on and so forth. So it's a wide range actually of alternatives. There was a picture there actually on the IFC presentation showing the whole system, where there is a number of alternative heat sinks and sources on the picture that gives a good overview.
Maybe just to quickly add to this, there's a really good publication. I think it's called Generations of District Cooling. If you can Google it, it shows a really good kind of evolution of district cooling in terms of the sources. But also, of course, the chillers are also used, and I think some of the chillers that that we see are the scroll, all sorts of scroll chillers, screw chillers, centrifugal chillers, magnetic bearing chillers. Another point I want to make is that heat pumps are coming in a big way, and heat pumps in district energy systems are, I think, will become more and more prevalent.
Thank you, Alexander. Actually, I have a question for you, Upasana. There are opportunities to introduce district cooling into projects in Ghana. Can IFC World Bank support early stage projects via pre-feasibility and feasibility studies? This one is for you.
So I think please reach out to us and please share the information with us regarding these projects. And then, we need to assess it and then we can get back to you.
Thank you. I have another one. Excited to know the initiatives by IFC World Bank. How important is the integration of seasonal cold storage and solar photovoltaic technology into district cooling systems? Who wants to take this one?
Maybe I can start, and others can add. Thank you for the question. Absolutely, I think thermal energy storage, and if we can connect a district cooling system with a renewable energy source, that is great. We want to avoid sort of prescriptive solutions. So while thermal energy storage offers great benefits, it's also not suitable for every single project. So for that, you really need to have scale. You need to have diversity of cooling load profiles. So thermal energy storage is a great advantage, but it's not really suitable everywhere. So we don't want to say that every district cooling system necessarily needs to have thermal energy storage. And of course, on the power source, any renewable energy would help, either through renewable PPA or through in-house projects. But in the end, it all comes down to really the economics, or whether somehow this carbon savings can be monetized is another question. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. I don't know if Ala, Christina, or Michael want to react. Otherwise, I will go to the next question.
Right. I just want to add a bit to what Alexander have said. Thermal energy storage is important, but it's not for all projects. It has to have a cooling load demand that is variable through the day. If it is sinusoidal through the day, then district cooling is okay to shave off the peaks and shift them to the bottoms. And by doing so, decrease the capacity of the plant and make it operate smoothly and more efficiently. So that's about it.
Thank you.
In
Yes,
the Colombian
please.
case, no, I only want to add the feasibility studies when we are considering thermal storage are be a little difficult in the way of find the space in the very close or very where the cities are very dense, where we have a lot of buildings. And we had an experience here in Colombia, in the city of Villavicencio. The primary design of the district cooling that it's operating in this moment in the city was with thermal storage. And the urban policies don't permit allows the introduction of this storage in the city. So there are a mix between technology, space, and institutional framework for urban planning or for the use of the sources in the environmental way. So we think it's a very good tool, but it's not only in the cost of the technology. Maybe the cost is on the institutional framework or in the space in buildings. That's important.
Thank you, Christina. We have only 3 minutes left. Well, I don't want to start with you now discussions on regulations. We don't have the time, but there's a lot of questions, aiming at knowing, well, actually, do we need more regulations? Do we need, if I quote, strict regulation on district cooling? Or maybe I could phrase these questions differently. Or if there's one measure, we have already touched upon this topic with the presentation of Upasana and with the insights of our panelists, but if there is one measure we need, what is it? Is it municipal planning, better access to financing, better buildings regulation? Of course, you're going to say it's a mix of all. But Michael, for Asia, on your dream list for Christmas, what would you ask so to grow district cooling faster?
It is public facilitation and sound urban planning, definitely. There are great examples. I mean, Singapore is very good at urban planning. There are good practices, but I mean, that really make a difference. Good urban planning, it is the key to succeed, and then public facilitation on that.
So, Christina, Ala, although I know that we have already actually touched upon that, but what is your wish for Christmas?
My wish for Christmas is better urban planning, definitely.
Okay.
Put it as a priority when you start a new city to say, this is district cooling area, this is, I don't know what area, but indeed, urban planning will open up the door for everything.
Yeah. Christina?
My wish is more good comprehension from our our institutions in the national level, in the city level, in order to introduce this technology. We have some barriers only for policies. We can use water because one regulation in one city. So it was very difficult to introduce a new technology, a sustainable technology, if our policies are not comprehensive with the business model or with this technology.
Thank you for your answer. Oh, Upasana, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on this. So I wholeheartedly agree with the panelists that enabling environment is very important. But on regulation, I want to say that it's not necessary that regulation, it may or may not be required depending upon the market, because regulation is also about controlling the tariff. And Singapore is an example where partly it is regulated, one area where they have a tariff which is determined by a regulator, and then the other bits are left for the market to develop as a result of mandating energy efficiency of buildings. So both models work very well, and I think the private sector model, just kind of creating the environment rather than specifically going down the regulatory route, that may be quite heavy, suited for some markets but not for everyone.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a very good statement. There will be a diversity of settings, obviously. Okay, I'm looking at the time. I think I will need now to wrap up our webinar to close. I mean, it has been a very rich conversation. So we heard about business models, about the state of play, the challenges, the opportunities. So, well, I would like to thank our partner from IFC World Bank. Thank you, Alexander. Thank you, Upasana, for your insights. And I'm pretty sure that it will help actually also to change perceptions, because we also heard that there is a problem with the perception of the district energy products. I think, too often the discussions on cooling at international level have been focusing on individual solutions, and one consequence of this is that we are missing the broad picture of the need to develop an energy system which is sustainable, efficient, resilient. So, and in this broader perspective, thermal networks and district cooling in this case are solutions that can connect the various dots like waste heat, renewables, electricity grids, and doing so, district cooling can support an optimal allocation of resources to develop better grids and better energy systems. So I would like to thank also Michael, Christina, and Ala. It was really great to have you, and so that you could provide, let's say, regional insights. I would like also, of course, to thank all our participants for joining the webinar. And with these words, I will close the workshop. So thank you all and see you soon. Bye.